Have you ever been asked to create training and just kind of accepted that training was the solution? But what if training isn't actually the problem? Today, Chuck and I are going to be talking about one of the most important questions that instructional designers can ask before they even start designing anything. Chuck, in our last video, we talked about what to do when somebody asks you to build training. But today I want to talk about something that surprised me when I first learned instructional design. Sometimes the answer isn't training at all. What do you think about that?
Well, when you think about it and you talk to folks that are in different parts of instructional design, so what they'll say to you is, don't go in with the assumption it is training fixable. Don't assume that this is a problem that you can design something to fix, because that's the real world. And they'll look at different statistics. They'll say only 12% of these can be fixed with training. Well, I don't believe that. I think if somebody is asking you to fix something with training, there's a problem. And I would say, well, more than half the time, there are things that you can do to make it better. But the assumption that it always requires some interaction is just not accurate. You can quickly lose your reputation in this business if you start providing solutions for things that don't exist.
Now, okay, so what if somebody comes to me and says, Denise, we need training. What is the first question that I should be asking them?
Well, define the problem. Why do you think we need this? And let me give you an example, another Chuck story, but this is a good one. So an organization with 35,000 plus people in it came to us and said, we think we need an intervention. We think we can do better at what we're doing. People aren't communicating. We have informal leadership is causing us problems. We've got this and that, and we would like to fix this. So my proposal then, first of all, was let's do some serious analysis. They agreed to that. So we set up 7 focus groups. We set up a survey for the entire population based on every nth, so I could get plus or minus 2 or 3% accuracy. And we also did interviews. So we triangulated all this analysis so we could make sure that what we were getting was actually what's going on in this work group. And this was 4 states away. So this was a week just doing the focus groups. It's a lot of work. We did the focus groups. We got the surveys back. We did the interviews. And what we found out was this was not something you could really do and try to solve and try to address with training. This was something else. There was a general feeling among this group that they weren't being listened to, that the leadership was paying no attention to them and making decisions without input that really they thought they should have. So we presented this, and as a result, the executive director stepped aside. And so the training was training the new executive director. It wasn't providing training for the organization. And I think it's important here to also say that I've always had a policy that if I did the analysis in one of these situations, that I probably wouldn't do the training for that solution, because there were too many people that came in and did analysis, and can you believe it? The solution is what I have for you. And it got to be a real problem within the industry for a while. The people were coming up with solutions to problems that didn't exist so they could keep the workflow going. So in this particular case, I didn't intend to do the training. I was just there going to do the analysis, provide them the information, let them make their own decisions based on what we found out. So it's a long-winded story, but I think it's important for people to understand that you really have to dig deep into this. And I know we keep saying it. Many of the things that we record here, we keep going back to the same notion, but I'm going to hit the note again. You have to make sure you've got something that you can fix.
Yeah. So just as an example for folks listening in who might actually have this as a problem, let's say that customer complaints are increasing in an organization. How do we as instructional designers know whether that's a training issue or not? How do we either say it's a performance problem, it's a management problem, or it's a training issue? How do we know what to say?
You go out and ask. you ask the people that are complaining. So if you're getting bad write-ups, Google, whatever, if you're doing internal questioning afterwards, people are filling out forms saying they're not satisfied with something, talk to them. And a lot of times the things that I would do is just sit there and watch. So if it's a retail establishment, I would just sit there. I would go in and watch what's happening. And one example of this was a bookstore chain that had decided they wanted to put coffee in there. So they had this coffee shop within the bookstores, pretty common practice, for a long time. I don't know if they're still doing it to the same extent, but they were getting a lot of complaints about the coffee element of this. So we observed, and what we saw was the baristas were not being trained. They were throwing them in there, and some of the orders you get now, it's 7 different things with a half this and a half that, and 7 colors and make sure it's green and everything else. And they were putting people in there that had no experience in it. So people were getting mad because they were not getting what they were ordering. So what we designed was a training for the baristas. And is that the way to pronounce it? Barista.
Barista.
So that was a solution, and the training worked, and they were very happy with that. It actually went nationwide. And so it gets back to the point of you have to observe. You have to ask, well, why are these numbers down? Why is my productivity down? Why is my customer satisfaction down? Why am I not getting repeat business when I should be getting it? And some of these answers are costs. Sometimes you're charging too much. Sometimes you're not in the right location. All these things are part of this bigger puzzle. And that's why we talk so much about systems, Denise, is because you have to look at every element of every problem, because there may be things that you haven't thought about that are directly connected to what the problem is.
If I think about a real world experience here, and somebody, an organization hired me as an instructional designer to create training because customers were complaining, and they just thought it was a customer service training issue. And I am just a one-person show, and I don't have, say, the resources to do like this large scale observation type of work. How can somebody in that kind of a position, because we may have folks here listening in who are in that exact position, what kind of questions, or what can that instructional designer do in that analysis if they don't have the ability to be traveling around and observing for themselves? What's another way that they can get this information, this evidence, to be able to say, yes, it is training, or, oh, wait, this is a problem?
Well, that's one of the real stresses working by yourself, working, in this vacuum of it's you and you. And one thing I've found is that if I can't get the information I need, I will not go to the next step and make a proposal about training. And as we all know, nobody likes to pay for analysis. We already know the problem. We already know our people. We already know, on and on. And they don't most of the time. Sometimes they do, but not often enough to rely on it. So if they're telling you it's a problem, many times I would just go on my own dollar and go and observe. And it was a large enough organization. I would sit in the lunchroom. I would listen to them on breaks. I would just do a lot of that. In fact, one of the exercises I do in grad school in ISD is I ask people to go out and sit in the mall and observe people. And people's eyes, designers come back after that and they say, I never thought about any of this. Mm-hmm. But just the way someone carries themselves in retail can make a difference. What is the follow-up when there's a problem? All the things that nobody thinks about, but they're all related. And if you're working on your own and you can't get this data, I would step back and say, I can give you a product, but I can't guarantee it because you're not giving me access to the information I need. So when I make a proposal, I always put in there, especially if they won't allow for analysis, that this is my best guess. I may be wrong because I don't have the information I need. So as we go forward, that needs to be the caveat on this whole relationship is I didn't get everything I needed. And don't be afraid to ask that and say that as designer, because this is your reputation. And you need to make sure that everybody understands what it takes to do this correctly.
Thanks so much, Chuck, for describing that and giving us that kind of information, because I do think that it's a real problem for those folks who are sort of siloed in on their own and consulting business doing this kind of work. That's an area that is probably a challenge for them. Yeah. So in our next video, folks, we're going to be talking about another critical piece of instructional design, which is understanding your learners. Because before you can design effective training, you need to know who it is you are designing it for. So we'll see you the next time.